Okay, I want to discuss Parshas Seitzei, something special, something new, and maybe in the end to circle back to Elul with that, with whatever chidushim we come out from Parshas Seitzei. The Medrash Rabbah has a pattern that very often in the beginning of a parsha it starts off with a halacha. It will say like halacha, Adam Yisrael. What if a person has this situation or that situation, and then it will keep talking and eventually work its way back to something in the parsha. And it's always an important limud to try and understand why that halacha is appropriate to the parsha and what it has to do with the psukim that the Torah is talking about. And it's very, very common in the Sfarim that they would discuss this. Apparently, it was understood among the great leaders of the Achrayim, the Kadmainim, the Gedolei HaChasidus, that there were deeper meanings tying things together in the Medrash than what appeared on the surface. And there's almost no better example than this week's parsha. Okay, this week's parsha, the Medrash is incredibly intriguing. The Medrash starts off with the parsha of Shiluach HaKan, which is in this week's parsha. Ki yikarei kan tzipor lefanecha. Okay, we'll talk more about Shiluach HaKan in a moment, but it says inside the Medrash starts off Ki yikarei kan tzipor lefanecha. Halacha. Now you would expect that the halacha is probably about Shiluach HaKan, but it is not. The halacha is about bris milah. And the Medrash asks, halacha, a child that's born with a bris milah, are you allowed to give him a milah? Now, there's a little bit of a discussion in the Mefarshim exactly what the question is, but just for the sake of our clarity, you could look into that, but just for now, we'll just say, are you mechuyev to give it a bris milah? We'll understand the kasha of the Medrash as follows. A child is born mahol, do you have to do anything to that child? And the Medrash brings what we all know, based on a pasuk, Kach shanu chachamim, this is what the chachamim said, Tinoik shenoilad mahol, if a child is born with a bris milah, tzarich lahatif mimenu dam bris, you have to get a drop of blood, even though he was born with a bris milah. Okay, this happens sometimes if someone had a bris milah and it's discovered later that the milah was done by someone who wasn't religious, or the person didn't realize that they weren't Jewish at the time. Their parents had a reform conversion or something, and only later did they discover that they need to go through a gerus. So there'll be a process sometimes of hatafas dam bris, of taking out, they squeeze it with a needle, they squeeze out a little bit of dam bris. Okay. We had a case in this community, I don't know if you remember, of a much more elderly person who we discovered that it was unlikely that the bris was done kahalacha, and we did a hatafas dam bris. It was a big simcha, we made a big party, and we danced and we covered his bris. So that's the first halacha, nothing to do with Shiluach HaKan. And then the Medrash goes on and talks about another halacha that has nothing to do with Shiluach HaKan, and that is that you find that the Torah, that the din of bris milah really is two separate halachas. There are two halachas in bris milah. There's milah and there is priya. Milah and priya. The Gemara says, mol v'loy para ki ilu loy mol. If you do milah and you don't do priya, it's as if you didn't do milah. This is something every mile is a big expert in, and that is that the process of bris milah involves two steps. The first step is cutting off the extra skin that covers the tip of the aver, cutting it off. That's the krisas ha'orla, cutting it off. But then there's also a process called priya, which is like peeling it down to be megala the crown, to be megala the atara. That is the second process of milah. Milah and priya, they are both necessary, and a moil at the time of the bris milah does both very quickly. If you're not trained, you won't chap what's happening, but they do both the milah and the priya. And that's what the Medrash goes through, the different shtei milas. It says milah twice, mikan le milah or mikan le priya. Shiloh Hakan, no connection. Then the Medrash goes on and says, oh, now we start having some connection. The Medrash goes on and says, why do we do a bris milah when a child is 8 days old? Because we want to make sure we don't do it when the child is younger, because we want to make sure it's strong enough to be able to withstand. Bris milah is a minor surgery, but we want to make sure HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rachamim on a person, and therefore he waits until he has strength. And then it says, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rachamim on a person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rachamim on animals, and that's why it says there's a halacha that that the first 7 days of an animal's life we do not take it for a carbon. Miyayim hashmini v'hala. Similar idea that we have that the Torah has rachmanis on behemoths, and then the Torah says, and the Torah also has rachmanis on birds, and that's the din of shiluach hakan. Now this may, just parenthetically, it may sound jarring for you to hear that the Medrash says that shiluach hakan is because the Torah has rachmanis on birds, as Rabbi Dr. Hack will tell you that the Medrash says that someone who says, Al kan tzipor yagiu rachamecha, right? That like HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rachmanas on the birds, and that's why we do shiluach hakan. It's a very, very negative thing to do. We just do shiluach hakan because the Torah told us to. But that the Mefarshim say that the Medrash is describing the midos of Hashem that you see from shiluach hakan, but we don't do mitzvahs because they demonstrate good midas. We do mitzvahs because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us to. So the two things are not a contradiction. But I'm not getting into that now. I just thought it might trigger a what? So I'm mentioning it. But what I want to focus on is, if you want to tell me that we do bris milah because of rachmanis on a child, we wait till the 8th day, and you want to parallel that to waiting to the 8th day before bringing a carbon, and you want to parallel that to the fact that we send the mother away before we take the birds or the eggs, so do that. But why did you start with Noilad Mahu? What shaykhs, what possible comparison could there be between the purpose, the point that you want to make, and a child that's born with a bris milah? Okay, valid question. So there's a beautiful, beautiful sefer called the Arugas HaBoisem, very, very, very special sefer, and the Arugas HaBoisem quotes a Kedushas Levi. And the Kedushas Levi reads into the parsha of Shiluach Hakan a very, very, very deep yesod about serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's just unbelievable how he reads it into like a deeper reading of the parsha of Shiluach Hakan. And he says as follows. He says that we're very well acquainted with the fact that closeness to Hashem could happen in one of two ways. It could happen from something that the Sfarim call Isarusa de Le'ela, or it could happen from something that's called Isarusa de L'Sata. What does that mean? That means that sometimes a person just starts to feel like he wants to be close to Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so good to us. And sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu will just be mashpia on us that Hashem just makes us feel this sense of drawing close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We see things clearly. I was sitting with someone a while ago, earlier tonight. He told me he's working hard and everything. He's just feeling like, what am I here for? Just to work? I have to build a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was just like this feeling, just like burst out of him. Sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that. It's beautiful. But that's not where our growth is. Our growth is when we bring ourselves to Hashem, not when Hashem brings himself to us. Okay? Now it's true that sometimes we need HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring himself to us because we are not mature enough or strong enough or focused enough to be inspired to move on our own without HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving us a little bit of a head start. The Kedushas Levi compares this a little bit to a mother who has to feed her child, and she has to turn the child towards her so she can feed the child. So he says sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to turn us towards him so that we can have a proper relationship with him. We've all had situations that b'siyata d'shmaya, we were inspired to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We can't take credit for it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu HaKadosh Baruch Hu was waving his hands in front of us, Kaviyachol, and we couldn't not notice it, and we were just there, and its inspiration comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's when we're not strong enough to be able to get there on our own. But when that happens, we have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to react to that by saying, okay, I'm no longer going to rely on that. I'm going to take that cue. I'm going to take that chizuk. I'm going to take that clarity, and I'm going to build from the inside in myself a certain sense of devotion and growth and continuity and consistency in my serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? That's the process here. That's what happens. Says the Kedushas Levi. He says like this. He says, Ki kare kan tzipor. He says, tzipor means a bird, but it also can refer to the Aramaic word tzafra. Tzafra means the morning. What is that referring to? So he says, it says in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch that a person should strengthen himself to wake up early in the morning, and the lashon that it says is that he should wake up the morning shouldn't wake him up. Now, what that means is, in practical halacha, is that the poskim advise that a person wake up before dawn, to wake up before it gets light. You wake up the light, don't let the light wake you up. But there's a deeper meaning, says the Kedushas Levi. The light, that's the inspiration. That's the ha'ara. That's the closeness. That's the clarity, right? Light is clarity. Light bulb. Clarity. He says, you wake up the light. Don't let the light wake you up. In other words, inspire yourself. Don't wait to get inspired. He says, Ki yikare kan tzipor lefanecha. If you have a moment, a tkufa, an opportunity, that there's tzafra, there's light, there's morning, the sun is rising, you have clarity, like many people have this time of year, a sense of clarity, of purpose, of inspiration, of yearning. And he says, and it could happen in different ways. It could happen baderech. It could happen in the course of his life, as he's going through his life. It could happen b'chol eitz. It could happen on a tree. It could happen in the course of him learning Torah. In many different ways. It could happen while he's traveling, while he's doing his parnasa, while he's doing his regular physical things, al haaretz. And he just suddenly feels this drive, this inspiration, or maybe perhaps something happens, that's just like you can't miss it. Sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu does things and you just can't miss it. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You could miss it, by the way. You could always miss it. I don't know if I ever told you this story that my wife's uncle always says over about I don't know if he always, but I heard him say over this story about this woman that went was about to go into the elevator. I told you this once. She was about to go into the elevator, and so she had this feeling that she shouldn't go in. So she didn't go in, and the cord snapped, and the elevator fell, and she would not have survived. So when he met her the next time, he said to her, Gladys, what did you learn from the incident with the elevator? And she said, I learned never take the elevator. So you could miss it. You could miss the message, but you're not missing it. Yikare kan tzipor lefanecha. You see that brightness. You feel that connection. You feel that pulling. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pulling you towards him. But v'ha'eim roivetzes al habanim. The mother is hovering over the children. The mother, meaning the Shechina, is the one that's being mashpia that. It's not coming from the banim. We're the banim. It's not coming from the banim. It's coming from the aim. It's coming from the Shechina. V'ha'eim roivetzes al habanim. Loisikach ha'eim al habanim. Don't prefer the hashpa of the Shechina over your own work. Rather, shaleach teshalach es ha'eim v'es habanim tikach lach. Take the derech and avoda that you're going to produce your own connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're going to walk towards him. You're going to work towards him. Is that not stunning? Unbelievable, stunning, beautiful, deep oimek of the Parshas of Shiluach HaKan, a meaning in the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan. Kedushas Levi. Unbelievable. That's Adkan Divrei Kedushas Levi. You could take a look. He says a little bit more about Shaleach to Shalach. There's more there to look at, but what's relevant for us is as follows. First of all, Kedushas Levi mentions a Yesod, and this Yesod is very interesting. He says the impact of the aliyah that you will have from the Hisayrus that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is less than the impact that it will make on you what you do to lift yourself up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That makes a stronger impact. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu kind of reveals himself to you, inspires you, gives to you, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that, so that's a gift from Hashem. It's there when it's there, and it's not there when it's not there. But when you create a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then you created something. It's there, it's palpable, and it stays. It has much, much, much more power to stay. And he doesn't bring this raya, but I have a raya. I have a raya to this. And that is, I love this raya. I love this raya. We have two types of holy days. We have Shabbos and we have Yantif. Okay? Which one's Kedusha is higher? There is no doubt that the Kedusha of Shabbos is higher than the Kedusha of Yantif. There is no doubt. We make Kiddush when we go from Yantif to Shabbos. We make Havdalah when we go from Shabbos to Yantif. Right? There's no doubt that the Kedusha of Shabbos is higher than the Kedusha of Yantif. But after Yantif, the day after Yantif, still has the Roshim of Yantif. It's called Isru Chag. We don't say Tachnun. You're still bound to the Yantif a little bit. There's a Roshim. Is every Sunday Isru Shabbos? No. Shabbos, the Gemara says in Masechta Be'ah Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, that Shabbos' Kedusha comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why we don't say Mekadosh Yisrael v'HaShabbos. Shabbos is Kedusha. That's a Sarusa de Le'ela. The Kedusha is here when it's here. Matzah Shabbos, Malava Malka, you're done. The Kedusha is gone. But Yantif, we say Mekadosh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. We bring it. Before Matan Torah, there was no Yantif. We're Mekadosh the Chodesh, and we say what day Yantif will be. We bring the Kedusha of Yantif. Oh, we bring the Kedusha of Yantif. Even when Yantif is over, there's still a Roshim of that Kedusha. Yishmak a Raya, right? Yishmak. So that's just a little Raya to a message that the Kedushas Levi gives us. But what I want to say is that that's the Pshat in the Medrash. The Medrash says if someone is Noilad Mahul, he has that beautiful bris milah, but he got it from Shemayim. He didn't get it. He didn't do it. His father, Klal Yisrael, didn't bring about that bris milah. It's a big madrega to be Noilad Mahul. It shows a tremendous kedusha. Moshe Rabbeinu was Noilad Mahul. It's a big thing to be Noilad Mahul. So Noilad Mahul, you might think, you know something? Leave it alone. It has the imprint of Hashem's kedusha. He was Noilad Mahul. You know, Adam Rishon was created Mahul. It's an incredible thing. No. You have to do something. It's the Isarusa de Lasata that matters. You reach for the Kedusha. Is that amazing? So the Medrash starts, the introduction to Shiluach HaKan is the din of Noilad Mahul, because according to the Kedushas Levi's deep understanding of the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan, the din of Noilad Mahul is a beautiful expression that we're not satisfied with just receiving the madrega from above, but we want to do the action down here below. We'll take it a step further. The Arugas HaBoisem himself says, he quotes the Kedushas Levi, and then he says, it's not just about inspiration that comes from Hashem and inspiration that comes from us. It's also about the difference between machshava and maisa. Meaning, there's a difference between understanding or having a madrega of Kedusha and actually doing the mitzvahs that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us to do. Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu, to do the mitzvahs. And he says sometimes the aim, the mother, is the machshava that comes from above. You decide to do something, you think about something, it comes from above. That's mashpia. Just like a mother creates a child, your thoughts create actions. And the banim are the actions, the peiros of your machshava. See, he says that it could be according to the derech of the Kedushas Levi. It's also saying that sometimes a person's in a situation where ha'eim roivetes al habanim. The person has all these wonderful thoughts, all these wonderful plans, all these wonderful ideals. He's a major philosopher. He knows how to sing by a kums that's like the best of them. But when it comes to action, he's not implementing. He's not doing the action. No, shalech to shalech eso'em. V'yes habanim tikach lach. What makes us special as Yidden is that we have a neshama and a guf. And we use our neshama to make its imprint on the guf. And then when then when the guf reacts to the imprint of the neshama, it also serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'm inspired and I act based on what I'm inspired. He mentions the famous Ramban that says Pshat in the Pasuk that says Im ta'iru ve'im ta'iru es ha'ava ad shetechbatz. Right? It says if someone is inspired, if someone is awakened to loving Hashem, ad shetechbatz is that you make it into a chayfetz, that you bring it into action. So the Arugas Haboisem suggests that that's the pshat of the Noilad Mahul. The Noilad Mahul may have all the madregas of someone who has a bris milah, but the action wasn't done. The action is not there. The Maisa Mitzvah didn't happen. No, tzarech lahatif mimenu dam bris. An action needs to happen. There needs to be a physical response to the inspiration. That's what he says. So I want to be meisif to that, but that's the hemshech about Mila and Priya. Because we don't have time to go through this at length now, but this concept that Bris Milah has two parts. It has the part of cutting off the Arla, and it has the part of peeling back the Arla. Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch in several places discusses the deeper meaning of both parts. And he says when a Yid serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there are two parts to his Avodah. There are the areas where we cut back. We don't eat treif. We don't go places. We don't do things. There are things we limit ourselves. We cut ourselves off from the world into a certain degree. We have a avodah of limiting ourselves. He says, but there's also a part of our avodah where we thrive and grow in our Yiddishkeit within the physical world, where we eat food and we make a bracha, and we make sure it's kosher, and we grow closer to Hashem from it, where we bring karbanos, where we make kiddush on Shabbos, lehisanag, v'sa'anugim, barburim, uslav v'dagim, where we have simcha, and we vibrantly are present in Olam Hazeh, and we do that according to the direction of the Torah. So there's an area of our lives where we limit our interaction in Olam Hazeh, but then there's the other area of our life where we direct our involvement in Olam Hazeh to be a reflection of the Ratzon Hashem. He says, Mila is the cutting off the Arla. That's limiting our interaction with the Ratzon Hashem. Priya is like freeing from the Aver. He says that's a certain sense of involvement in Divrei Rishos, involvement in Olam Hazeh with the guidance of Shulchan Aruch and the way the Torah wants us to do it. So it occurred to me that according to the Arugas Haboisem, if the point is that the Mila of a Noilad Mahul is that the philosophy might be there, the idea of Bris Mila might be there, but the action isn't there, and that's why the Medrash starts with the idea that in Noilad Mo, Tzorech Lahativ Mimenu Dam Bris, then it goes to the next part. Yes, and the action is so important that the Bris Mila has two parts. It has the Mila part with its separation from the Tanugei Olam Hazeh, and it has the Priya part where there's a vibrant engagement with Olam Hazeh. And then from there it goes on to the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan, as the Arugas Haboisem explains, based on the Kedushas Levi, that the idea is that Shaleach Teshalach Esaim V'Yesabonim Tikach Lach, to not allow yourself to get lost in just the machshavos of it, and to engage in the actions of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I just wanted to end with this with this sense. I think both of these lessons, both of these approaches, when it comes to Elul, are important things. That, Elul is a time, Baruch Hashem, it's a time that Yidden are inspired. There's a tremendous Hesirus. People are inspired. What separates people that succeed with the Avodah of Elul and those that don't are the people who aren't satisfied with merely being inspired. And they implement, and they make plans, and they demand from themselves a certain consistency and engagement. It's not just, I'm so inspired. Baruch Hashem, we're sensitive, open-hearted, focused Jews, and when it's this time of year, we feel inspired. That's the Ha'em Roivetzas Al Abanim. But our job is to be able to now Leisika Ha'em Al Abanim, to take that chizuk and that Hesirus and to do something with it, to implement it, to make something consistent, to make something real in our lives, and then it could leave a very, very real Roshim. And the second lesson of the Arugas Habaisem also, that very, very often when we're in this mode of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, a lot of what's happening is happening inside of our minds. Yeah, I should taka be better. Yeah, I have plans. Yeah, I have charata. Yeah, I'm doing tshuva. And there's a lot of mitzvahs that you can do with your heart. It's true. But if I can translate that, tzarech lahatif mimenu dam bris, if I could translate that into actions, what actions am I doing based on that? How am I transforming that into a way that it's going to make an impact actively on my life, that I'm taking advantage of the enormous oitzreis of siyata d'shmaya that we have this time of year, that the Melech, the Rebbeinu Shalom, is so close to us, and we have such opportunities, and we're taking advantage of that in an oifen that it will be nicker in the cold weather of Chodesh Teves, will still be warmed from the avodah that we did during the month of Elul. Yashikayach. Thanks for having me.